Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place where the noise of the day can slowly fade and curiosity is allowed to move at its own gentle pace. Tonight's journey is not about rushing toward answers or proving bold claims. It's about drifting through a question that has followed humanity for as long as we've been able to wonder at all. A question so familiar that we almost forget to ask it. What if the world you experience is not quite the world as it is, but the world as your mind has learned to shape it? Before you settle in, maybe take a moment to get comfortable. Adjust your pillow, let your shoulders soften, and allow your breathing to slow just a little. There's nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to remember perfectly. If your mind wanders, that's not a problem. Wandering is part of the journey. Tonight, we'll explore how beliefs, quiet, often invisible assumptions, don't merely colour our thoughts, but gently sculpt the very way reality feels from the inside. We'll move through neuroscience, psychology, and careful scientific metaphors, always staying grounded, always moving slowly. No equations, no sharp turns, just ideas unfolding at a pace that lets the mind relax rather than strain. If at any point you drift towards sleep, that's perfectly fine. This is not a test. Think of it more like a story your brain can listen to while it unwinds, a soft exploration of how perception, belief, and being are woven together. And so, with the lights dimmed and the day set aside, let's begin not by changing anything, but by gently noticing how reality already feels from right where you are. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a familiar place, perhaps a street you've known for years, or a room in your home that you could navigate with the lights turned off. As you move through it, you probably feel certain of what is there, the shapes, the distances, the sounds, the sense of space around you. It feels solid, reliable, fixed. But here is a quiet and surprisingly gentle truth from modern neuroscience. Your brain is not showing you a photograph of the world. It is showing you a draft. A carefully edited, constantly updated draft. At every moment, your brain receives an enormous amount of information from your senses. Light enters the eyes. Vibrations reach the ears. Pressure touches the skin. Chemical signals rise from inside the body. The raw data is overwhelming, far more than consciousness could ever process in full detail. So the brain does something remarkable. It guesses, not wildly, not randomly. It makes educated predictions based on past experience. It fills in gaps. It smooths rough edges. It decides what matters and what can safely fade into the background. What you experience as reality is the brain's best estimate of what is happening, given what it has learned before. This is why you can read a sentence even when some letters are missing. Why you recognize a friend from far away by the way they move, long before you see their face clearly. Why you can drive a familiar route and suddenly realize you remember almost none of the last few minutes. Your mind is constantly working ahead of the present moment, sketching the world just fast enough for you to move through it without effort. And most of the time, it does this so smoothly that you never notice. Occasionally, though, the illusion slips. You might think you hear your phone vibrate in your pocket, only to find nothing there, or mishear a song lyric convinced for years that the words were something they never were, or glance at an object in dim light and feel certain it's something else, just for a second, before the picture corrects itself. These small moments are not failures of perception. They are glimpses behind the curtain. They show us that perception is not passive reception, it is active construction. The brain does not wait politely for reality to arrive, it reaches out to meet it. One way to picture this is to imagine your mind as a quiet editor working late at night. The sensory world sends in raw footage, shaky, incomplete, noisy. The editor trims scenes, adjusts lighting, smooths transitions, and delivers a final cut that feels continuous and believable. Not perfect, but usable. This editing process is not a flaw. It is the reason you can function at all. Without it, the world would feel chaotic, overwhelming, and impossible to navigate. Yet this same process also means that two people can stand in the same place, witness the same event, and walk away with entirely different experiences of what just happened. Not because one is lying, but because each mind brings its own expectations, memories, and beliefs to the scene. Your past quietly leans into your present. Beliefs play a central role here. They act like guidelines the brain uses when filling in the unknown. If you expect the world to be hostile, ambiguous situations may feel threatening. If you expect support, the same moments may feel neutral or even kind. The external scene has not changed, but the internal draft has. This is not about optimism or pessimism, it is about efficiency. The brain wants the world to make sense. It prefers coherence over accuracy when forced to choose, and so it builds a version of reality that feels stable enough to move through, even if that version is incomplete. Think of it like a map. A map is not the territory. It leaves things out. It exaggerates some features and ignores others entirely. But it helps you get where you're going. Your beliefs are part of that map. They tell you what paths are possible, which ones are dangerous, and which ones aren't worth noticing at all. And over time, as you keep using the same map, it begins to feel like the territory itself. As you rest here, listening, you might begin to sense something subtle but important. The world you experience is not simply happening to you. It is being quietly assembled moment by moment by a mind that learned how to survive long before it learned how to question. In the gentle unfolding of this idea lies a profound possibility. If reality is, in part, a draft, then drafts can be revised, not abruptly, not forcefully, but patiently, through attention, experience, and belief. We won't rush toward that conclusion. There's no need. For now, it's enough to let this thought settle like a soft echo. The world you live in feels solid, but it is shaped, and shaping can change. And with that awareness resting quietly in the background, the mind can relax, knowing that nothing needs fixing tonight, only noticing. If the mind were willing to show you exactly how it builds your experience of the world, it probably wouldn't choose words or diagrams. It would choose something simpler, something visual, something that feels almost playful. This is where optical illusions quietly enter the story. An optical illusion is often treated like a trick, a small puzzle meant to surprise you for a moment and then be dismissed. You look, you're fooled, you smile, and then you move on. But beneath that brief moment of confusion lies something much more revealing. An illusion is not a mistake of the eyes. It is a demonstration of the brain doing its job exactly as designed. When you see two lines that appear different in length but measure the same, or a static image that seems to ripple and move, what you're witnessing is not faulty vision. You're witnessing interpretation. The brain is not asking, what is there? It is asking, what is most likely there? The answer it gives is shaped by context, expectation, and habit. Imagine the brain as a quiet editing room once again. Sensory input arrives incomplete and ambiguous, like raw footage shot in low light. The editor cannot wait for perfect clarity. Decisions must be made quickly, so the brain uses shortcuts, contrast, edges, patterns it has seen before, probabilities learned over a lifetime. Most of the time, these shortcuts work beautifully. They allow you to recognize faces instantly, judge distances while walking, and navigate complex environments without conscious effort. But when an image is designed to exploit those shortcuts, the illusion appears, and in that appearance something important is revealed. Reality, as you experience it, is not simply what enters your eyes, it is what your brain decides makes the most sense. Consider how you read these words. You're not examining each letter carefully, you're predicting the shape of the next word before you fully see it. This is why you can read quickly, why you can skim, why you can still understand a sentence even if a letter is missing or out of place. Your mind fills in the gaps so smoothly that you rarely notice the gaps were ever there. The same process happens everywhere. In dim light, a coat on a chair becomes a person for just a moment. In a quiet room, a random sound becomes meaningful. In a crowded space, you might think you hear your name, even when no one has spoken it. These are not signs of imagination running wild. They are signs of prediction at work. Psychologists sometimes describe this tendency using the idea of a perceptual set. It simply means that what you expect to see strongly influences what you actually perceive. If you are told to look for danger, your senses tune themselves differently than if you are told to look for beauty. The incoming information may be the same, but the interpretation shifts. A simple example appears when people are shown an ambiguous image and asked what they see. Some see a vase, others see two faces in profile. Once you see one version, it can be surprisingly difficult to see the other, not because it is gone, but because your brain has already committed to a draft that feels complete. Commitment brings comfort. The brain prefers a stable picture to an uncertain one. Once it settles on an interpretation, it holds on to it unless forced to revise. This is efficient. It conserves energy. It allows you to act without hesitation. But it also means that perception can become sticky. This stickiness extends beyond vision. It reaches into memory, emotion, and social experience. Think of how two people can recall the same conversation differently, each feeling certain of their version, or how a single comment can be remembered as supportive or cruel, depending on the listener's state of mind. What changes is not the sound of the words, but the frame through which they are received. Beliefs quietly shape those frames. If you believe you are unwelcome, neutral expressions may appear cold. If you believe you are capable, challenges may appear inviting. These interpretations are not consciously chosen, they emerge automatically the way illusions do, guided by past experience. And like visual illusions, they feel real. This is why arguing about what really happened can be so exhausting. Each person is defending not just a memory, but an internally coherent version of reality that their brain constructed to make sense of the moment. Neither version feels like a guess, each feels like truth. As you listen, you might notice how gentle this realization can be. It does not accuse the mind of being wrong. It simply acknowledges that the mind is always working, always interpreting, always trying to keep the world understandable. Even now, as you rest, your brain is making decisions about what matters. The sound of this voice stays. Other sounds fade. The pressure of the surface beneath you is noted, then gently ignored. Thoughts drift in and out, some catching your attention, others dissolving before they fully form. All of this is editing, and the editor has preferences. Those preferences are shaped by repetition. What you've seen often becomes what you expect. What you expect becomes what you notice. What you notice becomes what feels real. This is not a flaw to be fixed. It is a process to be understood. Because understanding it creates a small, quiet space. A space between what appears and what must be believed. A space where the mind can loosen its grip just a little and allow alternative interpretations to exist without threat. You don't need to force that space open. It appears naturally when the pressure to be certain relaxes, and as certainty softens, curiosity can take its place. Curiosity does not demand immediate answers. It simply wonders how many versions of a moment might coexist, each shaped by a slightly different lens. As this thought settles, there is no need to hold on to it tightly. Like an illusion, it can be noticed, appreciated, and allowed to drift away when the mind is ready. Because the goal tonight is not to dismantle reality. It is only to recognize how gently and how creatively the mind has been shaping it all along. There is a quiet moment that happens often in human life, though we rarely stop to notice it. It appears after a conversation, after a disagreement, or after a shared experience that seemed clear while it was unfolding. Later, when the moment is remembered, the clarity dissolves. Two people describe the same event in entirely different ways. One remembers kindness, the other remembers criticism. One recalls feeling encouraged, the other recalls feeling dismissed. Each version feels complete, vivid, and unquestionably true. This is sometimes called a Rashomon moment, named after a story in which a single event is recounted from multiple perspectives, each incompatible with the others. But this phenomenon is not rare or dramatic. It is woven quietly into everyday life, and it does not mean that memory is broken. It means that experience is personal. When something happens, your brain does not store it like a video file. It stores fragments, sensations, emotions, meaning. And those fragments are woven together using the same internal map that shapes perception in the first place. Beliefs are already present at the moment of experience, gently guiding what feels important enough to notice and what can be ignored. Imagine two people standing in the same room during a tense meeting. One enters the room already feeling uncertain, carrying the belief that they are not taken seriously. The other enters with confidence, expecting respect. The words spoken are the same, the tone is the same, the room does not change, yet the experience does. For the first person, a neutral comment may feel like quiet dismissal. For the second, it may feel like ordinary discussion. Neither is inventing reality. Each is living inside a version of it shaped by expectation. The brain is not trying to deceive. It is trying to protect coherence. To function smoothly, the mind prefers stories that make sense of the world and of the self. Once a story begins to form, incoming details are filtered through it. Supporting details are highlighted. Contradictory ones fade more easily. This happens below awareness, without intention. Memory plays along. When the moment is recalled later, it is not retrieved intact, it is reconstructed. Each time you remember an event, the memory is quietly rewritten, coloured by who you are now, how you feel now, and what the memory needs to mean in order to fit into your current understanding of yourself. This is why memories can shift over time without feeling unstable. The change is subtle, gradual, almost tender. The mind edits not to distort but to integrate. Social situations amplify this effect because they are rich with ambiguity. Facial expressions, pauses, tone, and context all invite interpretation. When uncertainty appears, beliefs step in to fill the gaps. If you believe people are generally kind, you may interpret hesitation as thoughtfulness. If you believe people are judgmental, the same hesitation may feel like silent critique. These interpretations do not arrive as conscious choices. They arrive as immediate impressions. They feel like perception, not opinion. And because they feel like perception, they carry emotional weight. This is one reason conflict can feel so confusing. Each person is defending a lived experience, not an abstract idea. When someone says, "That's not what happened," it can feel like an erasure of reality itself. But perhaps what is being challenged is not truth, but a draft. Two drafts can exist at once. The recognition of this can soften something inside. It does not require agreement. It does not demand that anyone surrender their experience. It simply allows room for the possibility that reality, as lived, is more layered than it appears. Cultural narratives deepen this layering. From early childhood, you absorb stories about what success looks like, what failure means, how love is earned, and who you are allowed to become. These stories do not arrive labelled as beliefs. They arrive as atmosphere, as normality, as the way things are. Over time, they become background assumptions that shape interpretation before thought has time to intervene. A raised voice may feel motivating in one culture and threatening in another. Silence may feel respectful in one context and rejecting in another. The same behaviour carries different meanings depending on the stories surrounding it. Language itself participates in this shaping. The words available to describe experience influence how finely you can notice it. When language offers many names for subtle emotional states, those states become easier to recognize. When language is limited, experience may feel flatter, less articulated. This does not mean one reality is richer than another. It means that attention is guided differently. As you rest here, you might gently reflect on moments when someone else's version of an event surprised you, not because it was false, but because it was unfamiliar. Those moments are invitations, not threats. They hint at the vast number of internal worlds moving quietly alongside your own. Each person you meet carries a private map shaped by memories you will never see, lessons they did not choose, and beliefs that once kept them safe. Understanding this does not mean you must accept every interpretation. Boundaries still matter. Discernment still matters, but it allows compassion to emerge without effort. Compassion is not agreement. It is curiosity without urgency. When the mind realizes that experience is constructed, not dictated, a small space opens between stimulus and reaction. In that space, certainty loosens its grip. The need to be right softens. The nervous system relaxes, and relaxation brings clarity. As the idea settles, you may notice how naturally the mind begins to slow. The need to resolve every difference fades. The world does not need to collapse into a single story tonight. It is enough to know that many worlds coexist, overlapping gently, each shaped by belief, memory, and meaning. And in recognizing that, the mind can rest more easily, no longer tasked with holding the burden of absolute certainty. As the night grows quieter and the mind settles into a slower rhythm, it becomes easier to notice something subtle about experience itself. Thoughts don't arrive randomly. Sensations don't feel entirely new. Even emotions often seem familiar before they fully appear. This is not because life is repetitive, but because the brain is always a step ahead. Long before a sound fully reaches awareness, the brain has already formed an expectation of what it might be. Long before your eyes finish taking in a scene, your mind has sketched a preliminary version of it. And long before you consciously decide how you feel about a situation, your nervous system has already begun preparing a response. In a very real sense, you're always living slightly inside tomorrow's guess. Modern neuroscience describes this gently but clearly. The brain does not wait for the world to present itself and then react. It predicts what is most likely to happen next and then compares that prediction with what actually arrives. When the guess is close enough, everything feels smooth and ordinary. When the guess is wrong, attention sharpens. Surprise appears. This constant predicting is not a flaw. It is the reason you can move through the world with such ease. Think of catching a ball. You don't calculate its path consciously. Your brain predicts where it will be and moves your hand there before the ball arrives. Or consider reading these words. You're not decoding each letter from scratch. You're anticipating the shape of the sentence as it unfolds. Prediction allows life to feel continuous rather than jerky, calm rather than overwhelming. Beliefs live inside this predictive process. A belief is not just an idea you think about. It is a quiet assumption the brain uses when deciding what to expect. If you believe a situation is dangerous, your brain prepares tension before anything actually happens. If you believe a situation is safe, your body remains more relaxed even when the external scene is the same. The difference is not in the facts of the moment, it is in the forecast. This is why first impressions matter so deeply. Once the brain settles on an initial prediction, it tends to hold on to it unless there is strong evidence to revise. This creates a sense of stability. A stable world is easier to navigate than a constantly surprising one. But stability comes with a cost. When predictions become rigid, new information struggles to get through. The brain prefers to slightly reinterpret the incoming signal rather than fully rewrite its internal model. It smooths over contradictions. It explains them away. This is not stubbornness, it is efficiency. Imagine walking through a familiar neighbourhood at night. Your brain already knows where the buildings are, where the sidewalk curves, where the streetlights usually glow. You're not discovering the scene anew. You're confirming what you already expect. If something truly unexpected appears, a sudden obstacle, an unfamiliar sound, attention snaps into focus. The prediction failed. The model must update. But when surprises are small or ambiguous, the brain often chooses comfort over correction. Beliefs operate at this same level. They're not loud declarations, they are background settings. They quietly tell the brain what kind of world it is moving through and what kind of person you are within it. A belief like "I'm not good at this" does not announce itself every time you face a challenge. Instead, it subtly shapes expectations. The brain predicts difficulty. The body prepares tension. Attention narrows. Small mistakes feel larger. The experience confirms the belief, not because it was inevitable, but because the system was already leaning in that direction. The loop completes itself without drama. This is not self-blame. It is self-understanding. The brain learned these predictions for a reason. At some point they helped you adapt. They reduced uncertainty. They made sense of confusing situations. The mind kept what worked. But what once worked can quietly outlive its usefulness. What is important here is not the idea that beliefs are wrong, but that they are provisional. They are drafts, just like perception itself. They are best guesses based on past information, not permanent truths. This understanding changes the emotional tone of self-reflection. Instead of trying to force new beliefs into place, the task becomes gentler. It becomes about offering the brain new experiences that slowly suggest a different prediction might be possible. The brain does not change because it is argued with. It changes because it is shown. Small, repeated experiences of safety where danger was expected. Small moments of competence where failure was predicted. Tiny signals that the old forecast is no longer the best one available. Over time, these signals accumulate. The brain begins to revise its draft. As you rest now, you may notice how naturally your own mind predicts what comes next in this story. It anticipates the rhythm of the voice, the kind of ideas that might follow. There is comfort in that familiarity. The nervous system relaxes when it feels oriented. And perhaps, without effort, a quiet curiosity arises. If the brain is always predicting, then changing experience may not begin with changing the world, but with gently updating the predictions we carry into it. Not all at once, not forcefully, just enough to allow a little more room for surprise. In that room, new versions of reality can begin to form, versions that feel just as real, just as solid, but kinder to live inside. For now, there is nothing to do with this idea. No belief to replace, no conclusion to reach. It is enough to let the thought drift through awareness like a passing cloud, leaving the sky unchanged. The brain will continue predicting quietly and skillfully as it always has. And as it does, you can rest knowing that even the deepest expectations are not fixed objects, but living processes, always open to gentle revision. As the mind continues to drift, something subtle begins to reveal itself. Beneath thoughts, beneath emotions, beneath even perception itself, there is a quiet preference at work. A preference so steady and so reliable that it shapes nearly every experience you have. The mind prefers what it can predict. This preference is not philosophical. It is biological. Your brain is part of a living body that evolved to survive, and for survival, nothing is more valuable than knowing what is likely to happen next. Predictable environments are safer. Unpredictable ones demand energy, vigilance, and rapid adjustment. This is why surprise carries such a distinct feeling. Even pleasant surprises briefly tighten the body. The heart shifts, attention sharpens, the nervous system wakes up. Surprise means the world did not match the forecast. From the brain's perspective, that mismatch is costly. It signals that the internal map may be unreliable, and unreliable maps are dangerous. So the brain works constantly, quietly, to minimize these mismatches between expectation and experience. Some neuroscientists describe this as the brain's attempt to reduce surprise, not surprise in the emotional sense, but surprise as unexpected information. You can think of it simply as the brain trying to keep the world feeling understandable. When the world feels understandable, the body relaxes. Beliefs play a central role in this process. They act like stabilizers, helping the brain explain what is happening and what is likely to happen next. Even uncomfortable beliefs can serve this purpose. A belief that the world is harsh may feel painful, but it is also predictable. And predictability can feel safer than uncertainty. This is why change often feels threatening, even when it promises improvement. When a belief has been held for a long time, it becomes woven into the brain's sense of order. Letting it go would mean admitting that the old map no longer applies. It would mean stepping into a space where outcomes are unclear. The nervous system resists that space. Imagine walking on a well-worn path through a forest. The ground is smooth, the way forward is obvious. Then imagine stepping off that path into tall grass. You can't see what's beneath your feet. Every step requires attention. Progress slows. Even if the destination is better, the effort feels greater. Beliefs create mental paths just like this. Repeated thoughts carve grooves. Familiar interpretations become automatic. Over time, they allow the mind to move quickly and efficiently through experience. This efficiency feels like truth, but efficiency is not accuracy. It is convenience. The brain is not designed to ask, "Is this belief correct?" It is designed to ask, "Does this belief reduce confusion right now?" If the answer is yes, the belief stays. This helps explain why people can hold on to ideas that limit them. A belief like, "I always mess things up," may be painful, but it explains disappointment in advance. It reduces the shock of failure. It gives the brain a way to make sense of difficult moments without constantly updating its model. In a strange way, the belief becomes comforting. This does not mean the brain prefers suffering. It means the brain prefers coherence. Coherence allows the nervous system to settle. It allows the body to conserve energy. It allows the mind to feel oriented in time and space. The cost of coherence is flexibility. To change a belief, the brain must tolerate a period of increased uncertainty. Predictions must be loosened. Old explanations must be questioned. For a while, nothing feels fully stable. This is why growth often feels awkward before it feels liberating. It is also why gentle change works better than force. The brain is far more willing to update its model when surprises are small and manageable. Tiny experiences that slightly contradict an old belief can be absorbed without triggering alarm. For example, if someone believes they're incapable, a single success may feel like luck. But repeated small successes, especially when noticed and acknowledged, begin to strain the old prediction. Eventually the brain adjusts, not because it was told to, but because the evidence became too consistent to ignore. The update happens quietly. As you listen now, your own nervous system is engaged in this process. It is predicting the rhythm of the voice, the pace of the ideas, the tone of the atmosphere. Because the predictions are being met, the body relaxes, breathing deepens, muscles soften. This sense of ease comes from coherence. And here is the gentle paradox. The same system that resists change also makes change possible. Because once the brain begins to predict safety and uncertainty, curiosity can replace fear. Curiosity is what happens when surprise is no longer threatening. In that state, new beliefs can form naturally, not as declarations, but as updated expectations. The mind learns that it can encounter the unknown without harm. This is why environments matter so much for transformation. Supportive contexts reduce the cost of surprise. They make it safer for the brain to explore alternative interpretations. Even now, as you rest in a quiet space, your nervous system may be registering that nothing urgent is required. No decisions must be made, no predictions must be defended. In this safety, the mind can loosen its grip. You do not need to resolve any belief tonight. You do not need to identify what must change. Simply understanding that the mind values coherence above all else can soften self-judgment. Resistance is not failure, it is protection. And protection can be thanked, even as it is gently updated. As the idea settles, you might feel a subtle easing, a sense that there is no rush. That change, when it comes, does not arrive as a dramatic break, but as a gradual shift in what the mind expects to be possible. For now, it is enough to rest inside this understanding. The brain will continue doing what it does best, quietly shaping experience toward coherence. And as coherence slowly expands to include new possibilities, the world you live in can begin to feel both stable and open at the same time. As the mind continues to rest, another subtle layer of experience comes into view. It is something so familiar that it often goes unnoticed, something you've been using since childhood without ever needing to think about it. Words. Language feels like a tool for describing reality. But in a quieter, deeper sense, it is also a tool for shaping it. Every word you know acts like a lens. It does not create what you see, but it influences how clearly you can see it, how long you can hold it in attention, and how easily you can return to it later. Imagine trying to describe the taste of coffee without words like bitter, smooth, nutty, or burnt. The sensation would still exist, but it would be harder to grasp, harder to remember, harder to compare. Once the words are learned, the experience becomes more detailed, more stable, more real in a certain way. Language gives experience edges. This is not just poetic, it is practical. The brain relies on categories to organize the world. Words help create those categories. They allow the mind to group sensations, emotions, and ideas into shapes that can be recognized again. When a culture has many words for a particular experience, people within that culture often become more sensitive to its subtle variations. When words are scarce, experience can feel broader, less differentiated, even when the underlying sensations are similar. This does not mean one language is better than another. It means each language tunes attention differently. Consider emotions. Some languages have specific words for feelings that others describe only vaguely. Once you learn such a word, the feeling itself becomes easier to notice when it arises. It no longer floats unnamed. It has a place to land. Without words, experiences can pass through awareness like mist. With words, they leave a trace. Beliefs are shaped through this same process. Many beliefs arrive wrapped in language long before they are examined. Phrases like, "That's just how I am," or "people can't be trusted," or "this always happens to me" sound simple, almost factual. But each phrase is a small story, repeated until it feels like part of the landscape. The brain treats familiar phrases as shortcuts. Instead of analysing each situation anew, it reaches for a ready-made explanation. The explanation brings coherence. Coherence brings calm. Language makes this efficient. But efficiency can quietly harden into limitation. When certain words dominate in a dialogue, they guide attention toward confirming details and away from contradictory ones. A belief expressed often enough begins to feel less like an interpretation and more like a description of reality itself. This is especially true of the words we use to describe ourselves. Labels like shy, bad at math, or too sensitive may begin as observations, but over time they become predictions. They tell the brain what to expect from future situations. They shape how effort is applied, how setbacks are interpreted, and how success is explained. The words do not force behaviour, they guide it. Even grammar plays a role. Some languages emphasise fixed states, while others emphasise ongoing processes. The difference is subtle, but it can influence whether change feels natural or exceptional. If identity is framed as something static, growth may feel like betrayal. If identity is framed as something unfolding, growth feels like continuity. None of this requires conscious agreement. The brain absorbs linguistic patterns the way it absorbs rhythm in music. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. And comfort feels like truth. As you rest here, you may notice the gentle cadence of language itself, the way certain phrases settle more easily than others, the way metaphors feel softer than definitions, the way images linger longer than explanations. This is not accidental. The brain evolved to learn through stories long before it learned through analysis. Images and narratives integrate more smoothly with emotion and memory. They travel deeper and last longer. This is why, in moments of stress or fatigue, the mind often reverts to simple phrases rather than complex reasoning. Language becomes a stabilizing force, offering quick orientation when energy is low. But language can also be updated. Introducing new words, or even gently rephrasing old ones, creates space for new interpretations. Instead of "I am anxious," the phrase "I am noticing anxiety" subtly shifts identity from fixed to fluid. The experience remains, but its meaning changes. This is not about positive thinking. It is about precision. More precise language allows experience to be held without being fused to identity. It allows beliefs to be examined without being attacked. It gives the brain room to revise its drafts without feeling threatened. As this idea settles, you may feel no urge to change the way you speak to yourself. There's no requirement to do so. Simply noticing the words that appear most often is enough to begin loosening their grip. Awareness precedes choice, and choice does not need to be immediate. Language will continue to do what it has always done, quietly shaping perception and belief. But now, perhaps, it does so with a little more transparency. The lens becomes visible. When a lens becomes visible, it no longer disappears into the scene. It can be adjusted or simply appreciated for what it is. For now, it is enough to rest with this understanding. Words are not just sounds, they're gentle sculptors of attention. They do not command reality, but they guide the way it is experienced. And as the mind grows quieter, the language of the moment becomes simpler. Breath, sensation, presence, no explanation required. As the exploration gently moves inward, from perception and language toward the body itself, something important becomes clear. Beliefs don't remain in the realm of thought. They travel, they settle, they express themselves through flesh and chemistry, through tension and release, through pain and relief. One of the most carefully studied demonstrations of this connection is known as the placebo effect. The word placebo is often misunderstood. In casual conversation, it is sometimes used to imply something fake or imaginary, as if the effect only exists because nothing real is happening. But in medicine and neuroscience, placebo refers to something far more interesting. It describes what happens when belief and expectation change the body's response, even when the external treatment contains no active drug. This does not mean the body is tricked. It means the body is listening. Imagine someone taking a pill they believe will ease pain. The pill itself contains no pain-relieving chemical, and yet, after taking it, the person reports genuine relief. Brain imaging shows changes in areas related to pain processing. The nervous system releases its own natural pain-reducing substances. Muscles relax. Stress hormones decrease. Nothing imaginary has occurred. The belief did not create pain relief out of thin air. It triggered pathways already built into the body. Pathways that exist precisely because survival depends on flexibility and adaptation. Pain, after all, is not a direct measurement of damage. It is an experience shaped by context, expectation, and meaning. The brain constantly evaluates whether pain signals are important enough to amplify or safe enough to soften. Expectation is one of the strongest signals in that evaluation. This does not mean belief overrides biology. It means belief interacts with biology. Consider how the body responds when you anticipate danger. Even before anything happens, heart rate increases, muscles tense. Breathing becomes shallow. These changes are not voluntary. They occur because the brain predicts threat and prepares the body accordingly. In the same way, when the brain predicts safety or relief, it prepares the body for that outcome. The placebo effect is simply this predictive system working in a therapeutic context. What makes it remarkable is not that it exists, but that it is so consistent. Across cultures, across conditions, across carefully controlled studies, expectation repeatedly shows the ability to alter experience. This tells us something profound about the nature of belief. Belief is not just a story you tell yourself. It is a signal the brain uses to regulate the body, and this regulation happens continuously, not only in medical settings. Think about everyday rituals, a warm drink before bed, a familiar song that calms you, a specific chair where you always feel more relaxed. These are not treatments in the medical sense, but they shape expectation, and expectation shapes physiology. The body learns patterns. It associates cues with outcomes. Over time, the cues themselves become powerful. This is why routines can feel grounding. They create predictable sequences that the brain learns to trust. Trust allows the nervous system to settle. Settling allows the body to repair and restore. Beliefs work in the same way, but at a deeper level. When someone believes that stress is unbearable, their body may respond to stress with heightened alarm. When someone believes that stress can be navigated, the same physiological signals may feel less overwhelming. The external stressor does not change. The interpretation does. It is important to be gentle with this idea. Placebo does not mean you can simply decide to feel better and override illness. The body has limits. Disease, injury, and genetics are real. No belief can erase those realities. What belief can do is influence how the body responds within those realities. It can alter perception, regulation, and recovery in ways that are measurable but not miraculous. This distinction matters. It keeps the conversation grounded. It honors the complexity of biology while still acknowledging the quiet power of expectation. There is also a mirror image of placebo, often called the nocebo effect. When expectation predicts harm, discomfort can increase. Side effects become more noticeable, pain intensifies, anxiety grows. Again, nothing imaginary is happening. The body is responding to prediction. Understanding this is not about blaming people for their symptoms. It is about recognizing how deeply intertwined mind and body truly are. Beliefs learned early, repeated often, and reinforced emotionally become especially powerful. They form the background assumptions the brain uses when deciding how much effort, protection, or vigilance the body requires. Changing such beliefs does not happen through force or denial. The body does not respond well to being argued with. It responds to experience. Small experiences of relief where discomfort was expected. Gentle evidence that the body can settle even when the mind is uncertain. Over time, these experiences adjust prediction, and adjusted prediction changes response. As you rest now, you might notice how your own body responds to expectation in subtle ways. The way muscles soften when you anticipate rest, the way breathing slows when you expect calm, these are not tricks. They are signs of a system designed to adapt. Tonight's understanding does not ask you to control your body with belief. It invites you to appreciate how responsive your body already is. Responsiveness is not weakness, it is intelligence. And intelligence, when met with patience, can learn new patterns without strain. For now, there is nothing to practice, nothing to apply. Simply noticing this connection is enough. Awareness itself begins to shift expectation. And as expectation shifts, even slightly, the body follows, doing what it has always done best, adjusting quietly, moment by moment, in service of balance. As the exploration continues, it naturally turns toward a quieter, more delicate counterpart to the placebo effect. If expectation can ease pain and calm the body, it can also do the opposite. Not because the mind is flawed, but because it is powerful. This mirror image is known as the nocebo effect. The word itself is less familiar, but the experience is not. Nocebo describes what happens when expectation of harm increases discomfort, intensifies symptoms, or creates distress where it might otherwise have remained mild. This is not about pretending symptoms are imagined. It is about understanding how meaning shapes physiology. Imagine reading a long list of possible side effects before taking a new medication. The words linger, nausea, dizziness, headache, fatigue. Even before the first dose, the body begins to scan itself. Sensations that might normally pass unnoticed rise into awareness. A slight flutter becomes a concern. Normal variation feels suspicious. The body has not changed. Attention has. Attention tells the brain what to amplify. The brain's job is to protect the body. When it receives a signal that something may be harmful, it becomes vigilant. Muscles tense. Breathing shifts. Sensory thresholds lower. Signals that might have been filtered out are allowed through. The experience feels real because it is real. This is the same system that alerts you to danger when crossing a busy street or walking alone at night. It is designed to detect threat early and respond quickly. The nocebo effect simply shows that threat can be perceived through ideas as well as events. Beliefs provide the context. If the belief is, "this will hurt," the brain prepares for pain. If the belief is, "something is wrong with me," The nervous system remains on high alert, scanning continuously for confirmation. Over time, this state of vigilance becomes exhausting. Many people live in this space without realizing it. Chronic stress, health anxiety, and persistent worry often involve the same loop. Expectation heightens sensation, sensation reinforces expectation, and the cycle continues quietly in the background. It is important to approach this understanding with kindness. The nocebo effect does not mean people are creating their own suffering deliberately. It means their nervous systems are doing exactly what they evolved to do in the presence of perceived threat. The threat in this case is meaning. Meaning is powerful because it gives sensations a narrative. A sensation without meaning is just information. A sensation with meaning becomes a signal. Signals demand response. This is why reassurance can be so soothing when it is trusted. It does not eliminate sensation, but it changes interpretation. The body no longer needs to shout to be heard. The same symptom can feel alarming in one context and neutral in another. A racing heart during exercise feels normal. The same sensation during quiet rest may feel frightening. The difference is not the heart. It is the story attached to it. Stories shape prediction. Prediction shapes response. Response shapes experience. This loop operates continuously, even in subtle ways. If you believe you are fragile, your body may move cautiously. Muscles remain tense. Fatigue increases. The belief appears confirmed, not because fragility was inevitable, but because the system adapted to the expectation. This does not make the belief foolish. It makes it influential. Breaking such loops does not require ignoring symptoms or forcing positivity. The nervous system does not respond well to dismissal. It responds to safety. Safety allows vigilance to soften. This is why environments of trust matter so deeply in healing contexts. A calm voice, a sense of being understood, predictable routines. These cues signal safety to the brain, reducing the need for amplification. Even small shifts can matter. Learning to describe sensations more precisely rather than catastrophically. Noticing when fear rises before symptoms intensify. Allowing uncertainty without immediately filling it with worst-case explanations. These are not techniques, they are invitations. As you rest now, your body may already be responding to the tone of this exploration. Breathing may feel slower, muscles may feel heavier. This is not because anything has been fixed, it is because nothing is being demanded. The nervous system relaxes when it doesn't need to defend. Understanding the nocebo effect is not meant to alarm, it is meant to empower gently. It reveals that suffering is not always a direct measure of damage. It is often a measure of how intensely the system is trying to protect you. Protection can be thanked, and once thanked, it can begin to ease. There is no need to monitor your beliefs or police your thoughts. That would only create another layer of vigilance. Awareness alone changes the tone of attention. When the mind notices a fearful story forming, it can hold it lightly rather than fuse with it. The story may still exist, but it no longer commands the entire system. Over time, this lightness reduces the body's need to amplify signals. The volume lowers naturally. As this understanding settles, it may bring a quiet sense of relief. Not the relief of answers, but the relief of compassion. The realization that discomfort is not a failure of will or imagination. It is a sign of a system that cares deeply about your well-being. And caring systems can learn. They learn through safety, repetition, and patience. For now, you can rest with the knowledge that expectation shapes experience in both directions. Just as belief can soothe, it can also intensify. Neither is a flaw. Both are reflections of a brain designed to adapt. And adaptation, when given time and gentleness, tends to move toward balance. As the exploration moves gently outward again, from the inner chemistry of expectation to the social world that surrounds you, another subtle influence comes into focus. It is not something you chose, it is not something you always notice, yet it has likely shaped many moments of your life, other people's beliefs about you. Long before you form a clear opinion of yourself, expectations arrive from the outside. Parents, teachers, peers, and communities all carry quiet assumptions about what you are capable of, what you should become, and what role you're meant to play. Often these expectations are never stated directly. They're conveyed through tone, attention, patience, and opportunity. A teacher who waits a little longer for your answer, a manager who assigns you more challenging work, a friend who assumes you will understand. These gestures communicate belief, and belief changes behavior. This phenomenon is sometimes called the Pygmalion effect. It describes how higher expectations can lead to improved performance, not through pressure, but through subtle shifts in treatment. When someone is expected to succeed, they are often given more encouragement, clearer feedback, and greater patience. These conditions make learning easier. Confidence grows, ability follows. The effect works quietly, like a current beneath the surface. The opposite is also true. Low expectations can limit growth without ever appearing harsh. Fewer opportunities are offered. Mistakes are noticed more quickly. Feedback becomes thinner. The individual adapts, not because they lack ability, but because the environment has stopped inviting it forward. This is not about blame. Most expectations are unconscious. People often project their own experiences, fears, and beliefs onto others without realizing it. The system operates automatically. The brain, always sensitive to social signals, picks up on these cues with ease. Human beings evolved in groups. Survival once depended on belonging. As a result, the nervous system is finely tuned to signals of approval, rejection, and status. When expectations shift, the body notices before the mind does. Confidence is not simply an internal trait. It is often a response to being trusted. When others expect you to struggle, your brain may predict difficulty. Attention narrows, self-monitoring increases, performance suffers. The expectation appears confirmed. When others expect you to succeed, the brain predicts support. The nervous system relaxes. Attention broadens. Mistakes feel less threatening. Performance improves. Again, the expectation completes itself. This is why first environments matter so much. Early experiences create templates for what feels possible. A child praised for effort rather than outcome learns to see challenges as invitations. A child criticized for mistakes may learn to avoid visibility altogether. These lessons do not fade easily. They become part of the internal map. Over time, external expectations can be internalized. What once belonged to others becomes the voice inside your own mind. The teacher's doubt becomes self-doubt. The parent's faith becomes self-trust. This internalization happens slowly through repetition, and yet it is not permanent. Understanding the Pygmalion effect introduces an important shift. It reveals that ability is not only an individual trait, it is also a relational outcome. Performance emerges at the intersection of expectation, environment, and opportunity. This understanding can be deeply relieving. It suggests that struggles are not always signs of personal deficiency. Sometimes they are echoes of expectations that were never meant to define you. It also highlights a quiet responsibility we carry toward others. The beliefs we hold about people shape how we interact with them. Our expectations become part of their environment. Even small shifts in assumption can alter the tone of an entire relationship. Believing someone is capable does not mean ignoring their difficulties. It means allowing space for growth. It means offering patience without lowering standards. It means seeing potential as something that unfolds, not something that must be proven immediately. As you rest now, you might gently reflect on moments when someone believed in you before you believed in yourself. Often, those moments feel warm and steady in memory. They stand out not because of what was said, but because of how you were treated. You may also recall moments when you felt unseen or underestimated. Those memories may carry a quiet weight, not because they were catastrophic, but because they subtly narrowed the field of possibility. Both experiences leave traces. What matters is not revisiting them in detail, but recognizing their influence. Recognition creates distance. Distance creates choice. You cannot control every expectation placed upon you, but you can begin to notice which ones you have carried forward without question. Some expectations may no longer reflect who you are or what you are capable of becoming. Letting go of them does not require confrontation. It requires evidence, new environments, new relationships, new experiences where different expectations are quietly reinforced. The brain updates its predictions when patterns change. As this idea settles, you may feel a gentle widening, a sense that identity is not fixed but relational, that who you become depends not only on effort, but on the beliefs that surround and support that effort. And perhaps without effort, a softer question arises. What expectations do you hold about yourself right now? Which ones came from others, and which ones still deserve a place? There is no need to answer. The mind can hold the question lightly and allow it to drift. Change does not begin with force. It begins with awareness. And awareness, when it arrives quietly, allows the nervous system to remain at ease. There are moments in life when effort quietly fades, not in a dramatic way, not as a decision, but as a slow, almost polite withdrawal. You try, nothing changes. You try again, still nothing. Over time, something inside you begins to settle into a different posture. The posture is not despair, it is efficiency. The brain learns a lesson. In psychology, this pattern is often described as learned helplessness, but the name can be misleading if taken at face value. It does not mean weakness. It does not mean laziness. It does not mean giving up on life. It means the brain has stopped knocking on a door that never opened. At its core, learned helplessness is an adaptation. When actions repeatedly fail to produce results, the nervous system begins to conserve energy. Why keep trying if nothing responds? Why invest effort if the outcome remains unchanged? From the brain's perspective, this is not pessimism, it is logic. Imagine touching a surface that burns you every time. You learn quickly to stop touching it. That learning protects you. Now imagine pushing on a door that never opens, no matter how hard you push. Eventually you stop pushing, not because you are incapable, but because the system has concluded that pushing is wasteful. The brain is always watching the relationship between action and outcome. When that relationship breaks down, motivation does not disappear out of nowhere. It is switched off to prevent exhaustion. This is why learned helplessness often appears in areas where effort once mattered deeply. Job searching after repeated rejection. Relationships where communication never leads to change. Health routines that seem to bring no relief. Creative work that feels unseen. In each case, the system learns the same quiet rule. Action does not matter here. And once that rule is learned, the absence of effort can look like apathy from the outside. But inside, it often feels like numbness, or heaviness, or a lack of energy that no amount of encouragement seems to fix. The important thing to understand is that the brain did not arrive here accidentally. It arrived here trying to protect something precious. Hope. Hope is costly. It requires emotional investment. When hope is repeatedly disappointed, the nervous system may decide that conserving hope is safer than spending it freely. So it pulls back. This is why telling someone in this state to just try harder rarely helps. The system is not convinced that trying is worth the cost. Words alone cannot override that calculation. What the brain needs is evidence, but not dramatic evidence, not sudden transformation. Evidence small enough to be tolerated without triggering fear or skepticism. Tiny experiences of control. These experiences do not need to be impressive. They need to be reliable. A single application sent without checking the result obsessively. A short walk completed regardless of mood. A conversation where one boundary is held even if nothing else changes. A creative action taken without expectation of praise. These moments matter because they reintroduce a link between action and outcome. Not necessarily outcome in the external world, but outcome in the internal one. I acted, and something shifted inside me. That shift is enough to register. The brain does not need proof that everything will change. It needs proof that something can respond. Once that proof appears, even faintly, the system begins to update its prediction. The door may not always be closed. Knocking may not always be pointless. This update happens gradually, quietly, without celebration, and because it happens slowly, it often goes unnoticed. People may believe they are still stuck because the old narrative remains familiar, but beneath the narrative, new data is being collected. The nervous system is watching. It is important to approach this process with compassion. Learned helplessness is not a personal failure. It is a record of experiences where effort did not feel safe or effective. Blaming yourself for it only reinforces the pattern. Compassion, on the other hand, changes the context. It signals safety. Safety allows experimentation. Experimentation produces data. Data updates belief. This sequence cannot be rushed. As you rest now, you might notice how this understanding softens the body. There is relief in realizing that lack of motivation is not a moral flaw. It is a protective response. Protection can be acknowledged, and once acknowledged, it can begin to loosen. You do not need to identify every area where helplessness may have settled. You do not need to make a plan. Awareness alone is enough to start shifting the internal tone. When the brain senses that it is being understood rather than forced, it becomes more willing to try again. Not all at once, not heroically, just enough to test whether the world still responds. Sometimes it does, and when it does, even slightly, the old rule begins to soften. The door may still be heavy, but it is no longer invisible. For now, you can let this idea rest. There is nothing you need to do with it tonight. The nervous system continues learning even in stillness, and learning, when allowed to happen gently, tends to move toward possibility. As the mind continues to settle, something becomes clearer about change itself. Change rarely begins with a dramatic insight or a sudden decision. More often it begins with a quiet adjustment, a small correction made without judgment. This is where a family of approaches known as cognitive behavioral therapy, often shortened to CBT, offers something surprisingly gentle. Despite the technical name, the idea at its heart is simple. Your thoughts are not commands, they are signals. And signals can be examined. CBT does not ask you to argue with your mind or silence it. It asks you to become curious about how your mind constructs its stories. In this way, it treats beliefs the way an engineer treats a map. Not as something to defend or attack, but as something to inspect. If a map keeps leading you into dead ends, the solution is not to blame yourself for following it. The solution is to check whether the map still reflects the territory. Many of the thoughts that trouble us most arrive already packaged as facts. I always mess this up. People will judge me. There's no point in trying. These statements feel solid because they are familiar. Familiarity creates a sense of certainty. CBT gently introduces a pause. Instead of asking, "Is this true?" which can feel confrontational, it asks softer questions. When did I learn this? Is this always the case? What evidence supports this, and what evidence quietly contradicts it? These questions do not demand answers right away. They simply open space. Over time, patterns begin to appear. Certain thoughts repeat across many situations regardless of context. Psychologists sometimes call these patterns cognitive distortions, but it can be helpful to imagine them as characters that show up predictably in the inner dialogue. There is the catastrophizer, who assumes the worst outcome is inevitable. There is the mind reader, who claims to know what others think without checking. There is the all-or-nothing judge, who allows no middle ground between success and failure. These characters are not villains. They develop to keep you safe. Catastrophizing prepares you for danger. Mind reading helps you anticipate social threat. All-or-nothing thinking simplifies complex decisions. The problem is not their existence, it is their dominance. When one character controls the entire story, the inner world becomes narrow. CBT's role is not to fire these characters, but to reduce their screen time. One gentle tool for doing this is sometimes called a thought record. Despite the name, it does not require formal writing or analysis. It can be as simple as noticing 3 things: the situation, the automatic thought that appeared, and the feeling that followed. Noticing is enough. Once noticed, an alternative perspective can be invited. Not a forced positive one, but a plausible one. Something like, "There may be more than one explanation here," or "I don't have all the information yet. This shift is small, but it matters." The brain is sensitive to repetition. Each time a thought is examined rather than obeyed, a small distance is created. Over time, that distance grows into flexibility. Consider someone who fears failure and therefore avoids action. The belief predicts disaster. Avoidance temporarily reduces anxiety, which reinforces the belief. CBT gently interrupts this loop by introducing microactions. A microaction is deliberately small. Small enough that the nervous system doesn't protest. Sending one message, practicing 1 minute, taking 1 step. The outcome is not evaluated in terms of success or failure. It is evaluated in terms of information. What happened when I acted? Often the result is less catastrophic than predicted. That discrepancy becomes data. Data challenges prediction. Prediction updates belief. This is not magic. It is learning. The brain does not require dramatic counterexamples to revise its map. It requires consistent ones. CBT works because it respects how the brain learns. It does not demand belief change first. It invites behavior change at a tolerable scale and allows belief to follow. This is why repetition matters so much. Repetition is not affirmation, it is exposure. It is how new pathways are formed. You can think of it like learning a new route through a city. The first time feels awkward. The second time requires attention. Eventually, the route becomes familiar. The old route does not vanish, but it is no longer the only option. Beliefs operate the same way. As you rest now, there is no need to apply any of this. Simply understanding that thoughts are constructions, not commands, can soften their grip. The mind begins to observe itself with a little more patience. Patience signals safety, and safety allows the brain to experiment without fear. Over time, the inner script changes not because it is rewritten forcefully, but because it is no longer the only story available. The mind learns that it can question without collapsing, adjust without losing identity, and explore without danger. That learning happens quietly, often beneath awareness. For now, you can allow this understanding to drift like a passing thought. There is no urgency, no task to complete. Change, when it comes, arrives the way sleep does, gradually, naturally, without being commanded. As the mind rests a little deeper, it becomes easier to imagine change not as a decision, but as a process already underway. Something slow, something biological. Something that does not require force. This is where the idea of neuroplasticity enters the story. Neuroplasticity is simply the brain's ability to change its structure and function in response to experience. It sounds technical, but the idea itself is familiar. You have felt it every time something that once felt difficult slowly became easier. Learning a language, improving your balance, becoming more comfortable in social situations that once felt overwhelming. At first, each step required attention. Over time, effort faded. The body learned, the brain learned. A helpful way to picture this is as a garden of pathways. Some paths are wide, smooth, and easy to walk. These are the routes you've travelled many times before. Habits of thought, familiar reactions, well-practiced beliefs. Other paths are barely visible. They wind through tall grass. They feel uncertain and slow. These are the routes you have not used often, or at all. Neuroplasticity means that whichever paths you walk most often gradually become easier to walk again. Not because the brain prefers them morally, but because it prefers efficiency. Each time you repeat a thought, an action, or a reaction, you press the grass down a little more. You make the path clearer. Over time, the brain begins to favour that route automatically. This is why change can feel frustrating in the beginning. When you choose a new response, you're not stepping onto a fresh road. You're stepping into tall grass. Progress feels slower not because you are failing, but because you are early. The brain requires 3 things to strengthen a new pathway: repetition, emotion, and attention. Repetition alone is not enough. You can repeat something mindlessly and see little change. Emotion gives the experience weight. Attention tells the brain that this moment matters. Think of learning a new skill. When you're emotionally engaged and paying attention, learning accelerates. When you are distracted or indifferent, it slows. Beliefs follow the same rule. A single positive experience rarely changes a belief, but repeated experiences, especially when noticed and emotionally registered, begin to reshape the landscape. This is why gentle awareness matters so much. Noticing a small success, a moment of calm, or a slight shift in reaction gives the brain something to work with. Without attention, the moment passes without leaving a trace. With attention, it becomes data. Over time, enough data accumulates to justify an update. This process explains why change often feels uneven. Old pathways do not disappear just because new ones form. The brain keeps them available. In stressful moments, it may return to them automatically. This does not mean progress has been lost. It means the system is choosing the most familiar route under pressure. Familiarity feels safe. With continued practice, the new paths widen. The old ones become less dominant, though they may never vanish entirely. Change is not erasure, it is redistribution. This understanding brings patience. Instead of asking, "Why am I not different yet?" the question becomes, "Which paths am I walking most often?" Walking does not mean forcing. It means choosing, when possible, the response that aligns with the direction you want to grow into, even if it feels awkward at first. Awkwardness is a sign of learning. Think of adjusting posture. At first, sitting differently feels uncomfortable. Muscles protest. The old posture feels natural, even if it causes strain. Over time, as new muscles strengthen, the new posture becomes easier. Eventually, it feels normal. The brain works the same way. Neuroplasticity also explains why self-criticism can be counterproductive. Harsh judgment adds stress. Stress narrows attention. Narrowed attention favours old, well-worn paths. Kindness, on the other hand, creates the conditions for exploration. When the nervous system feels safe, it is more willing to try unfamiliar routes. This is not sentimentality, it is physiology. As you listen now, you may notice that simply understanding how change works reduces pressure. There is no expectation of instant transformation. No demand to be better by morning. The brain does not change in leaps, it changes in layers. Sleep itself supports this process. During rest, the brain consolidates learning. It strengthens pathways that were used during the day. Even passive listening can contribute, offering new metaphors and perspectives that may surface later in subtle ways. Nothing needs to be remembered perfectly. The nervous system absorbs patterns whether you're fully awake or drifting. As this session settles, it gently prepares the ground for the next layer of the exploration. We have been speaking about change within the brain, grounded in biology and experience. Soon, we will step carefully into ideas drawn from physics, not as literal explanations for belief-shaping reality, but as metaphors that help us think about participation, attention, and connection without losing scientific honesty. For now, it is enough to rest with this image. A garden does not grow because it is commanded to. It grows because conditions allow it to. Light, water, time. Your mind is no different. And even in stillness, growth continues quietly. As the exploration continues, it reaches a place where curiosity often grows louder than clarity, a place where scientific language has been borrowed, stretched, and sometimes misunderstood. This is where the idea of the observer effect appears. It is often spoken about in dramatic terms, as if simply looking at the world changes it by force of will. But the truth, when approached calmly, is both more modest and more interesting. In physics, the observer effect does not mean that consciousness magically alters reality. It means something much quieter. It means that the act of measuring a system requires interaction, and interaction changes what is being measured. To see something, you must touch it in some way. Light must bounce. Energy must transfer. Information does not arrive without cost. A gentle metaphor helps here. Imagine standing in a dark room with a flashlight. The room exists whether the light is on or off, but the moment you turn the flashlight on, the scene changes. Shadows move. Certain details become visible while others disappear into darkness. The light does not create the room, but it shapes what can be known about it in that moment. This is what physicists mean by observation. It is not about belief bending matter. It is about interaction shaping information. When this idea is misunderstood, it can drift into claims that the mind alone creates reality. But that leap is not supported by science. Reality does not depend on being watched to exist. What does depend on attention is experience, and this distinction matters. While physics remains grounded in measurement and interaction, psychology and neuroscience show us something equally powerful at the human level. Attention selects what becomes real in consciousness. Out of countless sensations, thoughts, and signals, only a few are allowed into awareness at any given moment. Attention is the gatekeeper. It does not change the external world, but it changes the internal one profoundly. If attention lingers on threat, the world feels dangerous. If attention lingers on support, the world feels safer. The same environment can produce entirely different experiences depending on where attention rests. This is not philosophy, it is biology. The brain evolved to prioritize information that seems important for survival. Attention highlights what matters most according to current goals, fears, and beliefs. Everything else fades quietly into the background. This is why attention feels so powerful. It does not change the facts of a situation, but it changes the meaning of those facts. Meaning shapes response. Response shapes memory. Memory shapes future expectation. In this way, attention participates in shaping lived reality, even while the physical world remains unchanged. Understanding this helps dissolve confusion around the observer effect. It allows us to respect the limits of physics while still acknowledging the deep influence of attention in human life. Attention is not a mystical force, it is a biological function, and like all biological functions, it can be trained. Think of moments when you were fully absorbed in something meaningful. Time seemed to pass differently. Discomfort faded. Awareness narrowed into focus. The external world did not change, but your experience of it did. This is attention at work. It selects, it amplifies, it filters, and because it does this continuously, it becomes one of the main ways beliefs shape reality from the inside. Beliefs guide attention. Attention reinforces belief. If you believe something is important, your attention seeks evidence for it. When evidence is found, the belief feels confirmed. The loop strengthens. This does not make beliefs wrong. It makes them influential. As you rest now, you might notice how attention behaves naturally. Sounds rise and fall. Sensations appear and fade. Thoughts drift by, some catching briefly, others dissolving without effort. Nothing needs to be controlled. Simply noticing this movement can be calming. It reminds the nervous system that awareness itself is flexible, that experience is not fixed in one channel. This flexibility is the foundation of change. When attention can move, experience can shift, and shifting does not require force. It requires permission. The misunderstanding of the observer effect often comes from a desire for certainty. People want to know whether the mind truly shapes reality in a cosmic sense. Science, when honest, often answers more gently. It tells us what we can say with confidence and where metaphor begins. Here, the confidence lies in this. Attention shapes experience. Experience shapes learning. Learning shapes belief. That is enough. There is no need to invoke hidden dimensions or universal fields to appreciate how powerful this loop already is. As this session settles, it prepares the ground for the next idea, which will use another concept from physics as a metaphor. Not as proof, not as magic, but as a way of thinking about connection and influence in a world where nothing exists in isolation. For now, it is enough to rest with clarity. The world does not need you to watch it in order to exist, but your experience of the world is always shaped by where your attention gently lands, and attention, like breath, moves naturally when allowed. As the mind settles further into the rhythm of the night, it becomes easier to hold two ideas at once without forcing them together. One idea can remain precise and scientific. The other can remain symbolic and human. They do not need to compete. This is the gentle space where the idea of entanglement can be useful. In physics, entanglement describes a specific and carefully defined phenomenon. Two particles become linked in such a way that measurements of one are correlated with measurements of the other, even when they are separated by great distances. This does not mean information is sent instantly, and it does not mean thoughts travel across space. It simply means the system must be described as a whole rather than as isolated parts. That distinction matters. When we borrow the word entanglement outside physics, we are not claiming the same mechanism is at work in human life. We are borrowing the shape of the idea, the reminder that separation is often less complete than it appears. As a metaphor, entanglement helps us think about connection. Human experience is deeply interconnected, even when no words are exchanged. Emotions spread, moods shift rooms, beliefs ripple through families, workplaces, and entire cultures. None of this requires mystery. It requires proximity, attention, and nervous systems tuned to one another. Think of how quickly tension can enter a space. No announcement is made, no explanation is given, and yet bodies adjust. Voices soften or sharpen. Breathing patterns change. The atmosphere feels different. This is not telepathy, it is sensitivity. Humans are social organisms. Our brains evolved to read subtle cues, facial expressions, posture, tone, rhythm. These cues travel faster than conscious thought. They synchronize groups quietly, like a tempo setting itself before the music begins. In this sense, lived experience is never fully private. Beliefs do not remain sealed inside individuals. They influence behavior. Behavior influences others. Others respond. The original belief feels confirmed. This is how collective beliefs take shape. Consider economic markets. Fear spreads, and people begin to sell. Selling reinforces fear. Prices fall. The belief becomes reality through action. No single person controls the outcome, yet everyone participates in it. Or consider social trends. An idea catches attention. It is shared, repeated, normalized. Soon, it feels obvious, even inevitable. Those who arrive later experience it not as a belief, but as a fact of life. This is why collective belief can feel like weather. You do not control the weather, but you feel its pressure. You dress differently. You move differently. You plan differently. The weather shapes your day without asking permission. Beliefs operate the same way at scale. This does not mean individuals are powerless. It means influence is distributed. Each action is small, but patterns emerge through repetition. Entanglement as a metaphor reminds us that we are always part of larger systems. Our moods affect others. Others affect us. Even when we believe we are acting independently, we are responding to invisible currents shaped by shared history and expectation. This understanding can be grounding rather than overwhelming. It explains why personal change can feel difficult when the surrounding environment reinforces old patterns. It also explains why change becomes easier when support appears, even quietly. Support is not just encouragement, it is resonance. When someone believes in possibility, that belief subtly changes how they interact. They listen differently, they wait longer, they interpret ambiguity with patience rather than threat. These shifts invite different responses in return. The loop begins to soften. As you rest now, you may notice how your own body responds to the idea of connection. Perhaps there is comfort in knowing that you're not navigating life in isolation, that your struggles are shaped not only by personal effort, but by systems larger than you. This does not remove responsibility, it adds context. Context reduces self-blame. And reduced self-blame allows energy to return. In the quiet of this moment, connection may feel abstract, but it is present even here. The sound of a voice reaching you across distance, the shared language, the shared pace, the simple fact that understanding can arise between minds that have never met. This is not quantum mystery, it is human reality. As this idea settles, it prepares the ground for the next gentle shift. If experience is interconnected, then attention becomes one of the few levers you can reliably touch. You may not control the entire system, but you can guide where awareness rests within it. That guidance is subtle. It does not require force. It requires presence. And presence, when practiced softly, becomes a way of participating more consciously in the web of experience you already inhabit. For now, it is enough to rest with the sense of connection, not as obligation, not as burden, but as quiet belonging. Nothing is isolated, nothing stands entirely alone, and within that interconnection, even small shifts matter. As the night grows quieter, the exploration turns towards something small and surprisingly practical. Not a grand theory, not a hidden force, but a simple, everyday capacity you already use without thinking. Attention. Attention is not effort, it is orientation. It is where awareness naturally rests when nothing is forcing it elsewhere. In daily life, attention often feels hijacked, pulled by urgency, drawn toward worry, anchored to habits of scanning for what might go wrong. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is because attention evolved to notice potential threat more readily than safety. Threat demands response. Safety allows rest. Intention enters not as control but as guidance. It does not command attention, it invites it. Think of steering a small boat. You do not push the water into a new shape. You turn the wheel slightly and the direction changes over time. Large corrections are rarely needed. Consistent, gentle adjustments matter more. This is how intention works when it's grounded. Intention is often misunderstood as wishful thinking. But in practice, it functions more like a reminder of where you want attention to return when it wanders. It does not prevent distraction. It provides a place to come back to. This distinction matters. When people speak about intention influencing reality, the claim can drift into confusion. It can sound as though thoughts alone reshape the external world. Science does not support that idea, but science does support something quieter and more reliable. Attention trains the nervous system. Where attention goes, learning follows. If attention repeatedly rests on threat, the brain becomes better at detecting threat. If attention repeatedly rests on neutral or supportive cues, the brain becomes better at noticing them. This does not change the world. It changes what stands out within it. Consider how this works in simple terms. When you learn a new word, you begin to notice it everywhere. The word did not suddenly appear more often. Your attention became tuned to it. The same process applies to emotions, opportunities, and meanings. Focused attention shapes salience. Salience determines what feels important. What feels important influences behavior. Behavior generates outcomes. Outcomes feed belief. This loop is entirely biological. Mindfulness practices work not because they erase thoughts, but because they introduce space between stimulus and response. In that space, choice becomes possible. Without space, belief operates automatically. With space, belief becomes optional. This is why even brief moments of awareness can have disproportionate impact. Not because they fix anything, but because they interrupt autopilot. You may have noticed moments when you caught yourself reacting and paused. The pause itself changed the outcome. The situation remained the same. The experience shifted. This is attention doing its work. There have been experiments exploring whether human intention can influence random systems. These studies are often debated, with mixed results and many unanswered questions. It is tempting to build large conclusions from them. But even if all such experiments were set aside, the practical truth remains unchanged. Attention and intention shape the brain-body system in ways that are measurable and reliable. Heart rate changes, muscle tension shifts, hormones respond, neural pathways strengthen or weaken. This is not speculation, it is physiology. When attention settles on the breath, breathing slows. When attention rests on gratitude, mood shifts subtly. When attention lingers on fear, the body prepares for defense. The body does not argue with attention, it follows it. This is why attention can feel like a steering wheel rather than an engine. It does not supply power, It directs existing momentum as you rest now. You might notice how attention moves on its own. It drifts to sounds, to sensations, to thoughts. There is no need to correct it. Just noticing the movement is enough to loosen identification. You're not your attention. You're the space in which attention moves. From this space, intention becomes lighter. It no longer needs to be strong. It only needs to be clear. A clear intention might sound like, when I notice tension, I will return to the breath. Or, when worry arises, I will name it gently and let it pass. These are not commands. They are agreements with yourself. Agreements are easier to keep than orders. Over time, these small agreements accumulate. The nervous system learns what tends to follow certain states of attention. Calm becomes familiar. Reactivity becomes less dominant. This is not because life becomes easier. It is because response becomes more flexible. Flexibility is the real goal. As this session settles, it naturally leads back toward the practical heart of the journey. If attention can be guided gently, and if repetition builds pathways, then belief change becomes less mysterious. It becomes a practice, a slow one, an embodied one, a repeatable one. Nothing needs to be forced, nothing needs to be believed prematurely. Attention returns where it is invited, and with time, this system follows. As the journey gently turns toward practice, it is important to slow down even further. This is the place where many discussions about belief and reality lose their footing. Not because the ideas are wrong, but because they are asked to carry too much weight. Affirmations and visualization are often presented as spells. Say the words, picture the outcome, expect the universe to respond. But when we approach them this way, disappointment usually follows, not because the tools are useless, but because they were misunderstood. In a calmer light, affirmations and visualization are not attempts to bend reality. They are ways of training attention and rehearsing identity. Training takes time, rehearsal requires patience. An affirmation, at its most basic level, is a sentence you choose to return to. It is not meant to overpower doubt. It is meant to coexist with it. When used gently, an affirmation works less like a declaration and more like a compass. I am learning to trust myself. I can take one small step today. I am allowed to change slowly. These phrases do not demand belief. They invite orientation. The brain does not respond well to statements that feel false. When an affirmation clashes sharply with lived experience, the nervous system resists. This resistance is not failure. It is feedback. Effective affirmations are believable enough to be tolerated. They create a slight stretch, not a tear. This is where visualization adds another layer. Visualization is not simply imagining a future outcome. It is rehearsing the process of being in a different state. The brain does not sharply distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. This does not mean imagination replaces action. It means imagination prepares the nervous system for action. Athletes have long used this principle. Before a race, they picture the movement of their body, the rhythm of their breath, the feeling of the ground beneath their feet. They are not fantasizing about winning. They're rehearsing coordination. The same principle applies to everyday life. Imagine a difficult conversation. Instead of visualizing the perfect outcome, visualize your posture, your tone of voice, the way your shoulders soften, the pause before you respond. These details matter because the nervous system learns through sensation. When visualization includes the body, it becomes training rather than fantasy. This is also where the act as if principle finds its grounded meaning. Acting as if does not mean pretending everything is already perfect. It means allowing behavior to lead belief, rather than waiting for belief to arrive first. Behavior provides evidence. Evidence updates belief. If you act as if you are capable of learning, even while doubting, the brain records the action. Over time, repeated action creates familiarity. Familiarity reduces threat. Reduced threat allows confidence to grow. This sequence is slow, but it is reliable. Visualization strengthens this process by making behavior feel more familiar before it happens. When the moment arrives, the nervous system recognizes it. Recognition reduces surprise. Reduced surprise reduces stress. This is why visualization works best when paired with action. Without action, it remains abstract. With action, it becomes preparation. It is also important to say what affirmations and visualization do not do. They do not bypass difficulty. They do not guarantee outcomes. They do not remove uncertainty. What they do is adjust readiness. Readiness determines how you meet what happens next. As you rest now, you might notice how the idea of training feels different from the idea of wishing. Training is patient. It allows mistakes. It expects uneven progress. Wishing often carries urgency and disappointment. The nervous system prefers training. Training signals safety. Safety allows repetition. Repetition builds pathways. This returns us to the earlier image of walking new paths through tall grass. Affirmations and visualization are not the path itself. They are ways of reminding yourself where you intend to walk, even when the ground feels unfamiliar. They help keep attention oriented in a chosen direction without forcing belief. This approach also avoids the trap of self-blame. When outcomes do not match intention, there is no accusation that you did it wrong. There is only information, more data for the system to learn from. Learning thrives in an atmosphere free of judgment. As this session settles, it naturally opens toward the next layer of practice. If attention can be trained, and if repetition builds pathways, then what you consistently notice becomes important. This leads us gently toward gratitude, not as denial of pain, but as a way of adjusting the spotlight of awareness. For now, it is enough to rest with this reframing. You are not trying to convince reality to change. You're teaching your nervous system how to move through it with greater ease. And teaching, when done kindly, always takes time. As the pace slows even further, the exploration arrives at a concept that is often misunderstood precisely because it is spoken about too loudly: gratitude. For many people, gratitude sounds like denial. Like being told to look on the bright side when something hurts, like a demand to feel thankful instead of angry, sad, or afraid. But gratitude, when approached gently and honestly, is none of those things. Gratitude is not an emotion you must generate. It is a way of directing attention. And attention, as we've seen, shapes experience. The brain does not register the world as a whole. It samples, it filters, it highlights. What gets highlighted feels important. What feels important shapes memory, expectation, and behavior. Gratitude works by quietly adjusting this filter. Imagine walking through a familiar neighborhood. If you're scanning for danger, you will notice broken windows, unfamiliar faces, sharp sounds. If you're scanning for beauty, you will notice light through leaves, a warm window, the rhythm of footsteps. The street has not changed, the filter has. Gratitude does not erase broken windows. It simply allows other details to enter awareness alongside them. This distinction is essential. Healthy gratitude does not require pretending that pain is good or that hardship is a gift. It allows pain to exist without giving it exclusive control of attention. In this way, gratitude becomes a form of balance. Research in psychology and neuroscience suggests that regularly noticing small positives can shift baseline mood over time. Not because life becomes easier, but because the brain becomes better at detecting support and possibility. This is a skill, and like all skills, it strengthens with practice. One reason gratitude feels difficult during hard periods is that the nervous system is already working hard to manage threat. Asking it to suddenly notice good things can feel unrealistic. This is why effective gratitude practices are modest. They do not ask for joy, they ask for noticing. Noticing one thing that helped today, one moment that felt slightly easier, one person who showed patience, one small relief. These moments are not dramatic. That is why they are often missed. But when they are noticed, something important happens. The brain receives evidence that support exists alongside struggle, that evidence matters, it widens the map. Consider an evening practice sometimes called a quiet inventory. Before sleep, you gently recall 3 small things that did not go wrong, not 3 triumphs, just 3 neutral or supportive moments, a meal that was warm, a message that arrived, a task completed, even imperfectly. The purpose is not to feel grateful in a dramatic way. The purpose is to register these moments so they are not lost. Lost moments leave no trace. Registered moments shape expectation. Over time, this practice trains the brain to notice doors rather than walls. This does not mean doors are always open. It means the brain stops assuming they're always closed. Gratitude also plays an important role in resilience. Resilience is often misunderstood as toughness. In reality, it is flexibility, the ability to adapt beliefs when circumstances change. A resilient belief sounds like, "This is hard, and I can still find a way to respond." Gratitude supports this flexibility by reminding the nervous system that resources exist, not infinite resources, just enough to take the next step. This prevents collapse into helplessness. It is also important to say that gratitude can coexist with grief. You can miss someone deeply and still notice kindness. You can feel overwhelmed and still recognize support. These experiences do not cancel each other out. In fact, allowing them to coexist often reduces internal conflict. As you rest now, you might notice how the idea of gratitude feels when it's framed this way, less like an obligation, more like a gentle widening of view. There is no checklist, no requirement to feel a certain way, only an invitation to notice what is already present. This noticing does not require effort, it requires permission, and permission, when given, allows attention to move more freely. As this session settles, it prepares the way for the final reflection. If beliefs shape perception, and perception shapes action, then reality sculpting is not an event, it is a process, a long one that unfolds quietly through small adjustments repeated over time. For now, it is enough to let this idea rest. You do not need to practice gratitude tonight. The understanding alone is already a shift. The brain continues learning even as you sleep, and learning, when allowed to happen gently, tends to open more doors than it closes. As this long, quiet journey begins to slow toward rest, it may feel natural to look back, not to review every idea, but to sense the shape that has been forming underneath them. Nothing here has been about fixing yourself. Nothing has been about becoming someone else. What has been unfolding is a gentler realization. Your experience of reality is not static, and neither are you. Throughout these sessions, a pattern has quietly emerged. Perception influences belief. Belief shapes how the body responds. The body guides action. Action generates feedback. Feedback over time becomes identity. This loop runs continuously, whether you're paying attention to it or not. What changes everything is noticing the loop. Once noticed, it becomes possible to participate in it more consciously, not to control it, but to guide it. Not to demand outcomes, but to adjust direction. This is what it means to rewire reality in an honest sense. Reality, in its vast complexity, does not bend to personal wishes. But the reality you live inside, the one shaped by meaning, interpretation, memory, and response, remains open to gentle sculpting. A sculpture is not created in a single strike. It emerges through repeated careful touches. Each touch is small. Each one matters. Beliefs function the same way. You have seen how beliefs can narrow perception, amplifying threat and limiting possibility. You have also seen how beliefs can soften experience, opening space for movement and growth. Neither type of belief arrives fully formed. They are learned, reinforced, maintained through repetition. And because they are learned, they can be updated. Updating does not require dramatic insight. It requires consistency, a small action taken despite doubt. A pause inserted before a familiar reaction. A moment of attention redirected gently. A belief questioned without hostility. These are the tools of long-term change. They do not promise transformation by morning. They promise something quieter and more reliable, gradual alignment. Alignment between what you believe, how you feel, and how you act. This alignment is sometimes described as unshakable knowing. But that phrase can sound intimidating, as if certainty must arrive all at once. In practice, unshakable knowing is built from evidence. Evidence that you can adapt, evidence that you can learn, evidence that effort sometimes leads somewhere new. This evidence accumulates slowly, often without being noticed. One day, you realize you trust yourself more, not because you decided to, but because your system has learned it. That learning happens whether or not you call it manifestation. Manifestation, stripped of myth, is simply pattern reinforcement. What you consistently practice becomes familiar. What becomes familiar feels real. What feels real guides behavior. There is no magic required, only time. This understanding also removes pressure. There is no finish line where you become permanently healed, confident, or complete. Life continues to offer uncertainty. The nervous system continues to respond. Beliefs continue to evolve. The goal is not to stop this movement. The goal is to relate to it with kindness. When setbacks occur, they are not proof of failure. They are reminders that old pathways still exist. They were built for a reason. They deserve respect, not shame. Respect allows flexibility. Flexibility allows change. As you rest now, you might sense a quiet reassurance beneath everything that has been said. You're not trapped in one version of yourself. You never were. You're participating in an ongoing process of becoming, shaped by experience, updated by awareness, and guided by attention. Even tonight, as you lie still, the brain continues adjusting. It integrates what felt meaningful. It discards what did not. It strengthens pathways touched by emotion and repetition. Sleep itself is part of the sculpture, so there is nothing more you need to do. No belief to force, no habit to overhaul, no insight to cling to, only rest. If you find yourself returning to these ideas in the future, let it be lightly. Let curiosity replace urgency. Let patience replace pressure. And if this quiet exploration has felt supportive, you are always welcome to return. Many others drift through these reflections at different times, in different places, carrying their own versions of the same questions. You do not walk this path alone. For now, allow the mind to soften. Let the body settle. Let the breath find its own rhythm. The world remains complex, but your inner map can grow kinder, and that, for time, changes everything that matters.